Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Books I Should Have Read a Long Time Ago, which have been totally chosen based on how I feel at the time, but they're basically books I should have read a long time ago. Now, the first couple books that I've done for this series have all been books that I ought to have read for sort of external reasons relating to the person I am, the sort of books that I read, things that if you do a particular type of thing, you ought to do this other thing. Like, if you study English literature at some point, you should read the Bible because of its foundational position within, English literature, as an example. There are books like that. However, in this case, this is a book I should have read years ago because more than 20 years ago, I was given this by some family friends at Christmas, and I just didn't read it. So here. Basically, I was handed two books out of Ellis Peters' George Felse, Superintendent George Felse series, and two books, kind of one in the middle and one at the end, and got them for Christmas, and I didn't read them. Which is, I suspect, a thing that happens more than some people like to admit. I have several books on my shelf that I was given at various points in time as gifts and never read. In fact, when I mentioned this to my father, he gave me a slightly hinky look and reminded me that I hadn't read The Railway Children, even though I liked E. Nesbit. I don't like E. Nesbit as much as I like some other children's authors, so I'm going to just lay that one aside and move on, because E. Nesbit is not an author that I have reread umpty-squillion times the way I have some others. So we're going to move on, and maybe at some point I'll get around to reading that one too, in the moral obligation of gifting. Because, if somebody gives you a thing, you're supposed to wear it once, read it once, stick it on the wall once, put it with your tchotchkes once, and if you don't, you are a failure as a recipient of a gift, because, that's how that works. There are rules about these things. Anyways. So, I decided I should read this because I should have read it years ago, so I'm doing it now. Anyways, so what did I think of this book that I didn't read when I should have? It's not bad. Keep in mind, it's a fairly light murder mystery. It's a murder mystery. Murder mysteries always have a certain minimal necessary darkness to them because somebody died, deliberately, but it is a light read, which is amplified by the fact that one of the primary perspective characters in this book is in fact a 12-year-old boy who gets in over his head, is supremely confident, indeed overconfident, about a great many things in life, not least of which being his hope that he could somehow forge well enough to trick someone into thinking that a piece of vellum was valuable when, as far as he was aware, it wasn't. It turns out to have been valuable and indeed causes a great deal of trouble, including the murder victim's death, but the young boy, Bossy, does not in fact know this when he attempts to create that. The thing about this is that this is very much a small town mystery, including the small town trope of, the thing where people have to get accepted into and learn to be one of the people of the town, that there's sort of a quality whereby the town vets the people who they're going to allow to stay, and if they don't want them to stay, then they socially freeze them out and make it unpleasant for people to live there until they finally go away. So the book opens with a newcomer to the town who is fairly wealthy. He's bought a big fancy new mansion, and he's done it up real pretty. And there's a lot of concern already to begin with in the among people discussing him, in that there's, concern that he's not going to fit in and that they're going to have to freeze him out. But by the second or third chapter, a problem has reared its head, and it's sort of a combined problem from the small town perspective anyways, that it took them too long to get started on trying to freeze him out, and now that he's established himself, he's too wealthy for them to successfully do it, in that he's rich enough that he can afford to travel to the next town over if he wants friendly society. He can afford to shut himself away in his mansion because he's got this, incredibly large home and massive grounds, so it's not like he's going to feel trapped because he's got massive grounds. He's wealthy enough that he can effectively bully his way into various things that need his monetary support, and so it's too late for them to freeze him out, and now they don't know how they're going to get rid of this invader. Which is how Bossy's plan with the vellum kicks in. Because basically a bunch of kids in the choir, among the various social efforts that this new interloper has gone to, he has basically managed to take over the church choir, and the problem is he's bringing in a lot of super modern music and so on, and none of it is the traditional songs that everybody likes to sing, that everybody knows, that has all the normal pretty harmonies that everybody likes. And so the kids in the choir are deeply, deeply personally offended at this, and Bossy, being among the leaders, decides that he has to figure out how to drive this guy out, Arthur Rainbow, out himself, because the adults have clearly left it too long and now can't figure out how to do it. So Bossy figures that he's going to arrange to publicly humiliate Arthur Rainbow by tricking him with a piece of vellum and convincing him that, it's real, or at least real enough that he'll make a big stink and then be publicly embarrassed and then have to slink away shamefacedly. Various kerfuffles happen, and Arthur Rainbow is murdered, and Bossy is a witness and manages to be nearly murdered, because the thing is that he's a witness who didn't see enough to actually say, that guy there murdered him, but was sufficiently noticed by the murderer that the murderer has decided that better to try to finish this kid off than discover that he is, in fact, able to give the police, the key piece of information that would let him, would let him get away with it. Anyway, so, there's a very dramatic denouement at the end, but it's a book that is extremely punctuated with, as I said, a 12-year-old's perspective on things, an overconfident, cheerful, aggressively determined to believe that he is smarter than everybody else 12-year-old, and a little side romance going on between the widow, or relict, a word that I did not expect to see in use, but there you go. Arthur Rainbow's relict is a lovely young woman who married him on basically purely mercenary practical grounds. They had a business arrangement in effect. She'd show up and use her feminine wiles on people, and in exchange she gets to have a really, really nice house and a respectable, wealthy husband. And, it was a practical arrangement, but she didn't, care about him deeply. So the moment he's dead, she's off having a romance with one of the locals. It's very, very clear, it's made really, really clear in a non-judgmental way, by the way, that this was a purely mercenary thing, and that, the fact that Rainbow didn't care what his wife got up to as long as it didn't negatively affect his business, just means that, she has no compunction for visibly and openly moving on immediately after his death, and the book makes no bones about being on her side in this matter. It's a very interesting thing. Like, there isn't even really a hint of negative judgment about her doing so, at least not that I can see. So it's nice, and it's different, in that way in particular. Like, she's a perfunctory suspect. The book never really leans on any real notion of her potentially being a suspect, although I did like the really, really blatant, heavy-handed bit of red herring that the book does, where, they find evidence of somebody with small, who like, it walks like a person who has feet that are too small for his shoes, and then, you find a guy who is wearing, shoes that are too big for his feet, and he's like, yeah, I was up there, but no, I turned around and walked back down the stairs. I didn't want to get involved. And it's sort of this, like, massive, red flag that is sort of like, here's a red herring. We will disabuse you of that notion immediately. Which I thought was amusing. Anyway, so it's an entertaining book. It's light and fun and very, very small towny, which, is fine. It's set in a small town. I don't really have a lot to say, except this was probably a good judgment call on the part of the people who picked it. I probably would have enjoyed it back when I was a teenager when I got it the first time, but, I didn't, and mea culpa, but I'm reading it now. Anyways, I think that's all I have to say, and I will read the other one that I got, which, like I said, I think is like book 7 out of 10 or something, somewhere in the middle, late middle. I'll read that at some point in the near future after some more Dr. Dolittle. We will be going back to Dr. Dolittle next week, so there you go. That's everything, and I will see you all next week.